the sword on his back, licks his wounds from escaping the traps, from the battles and scraps, on his journey abroad, trying to save his own soul instead of saving the broad. Once the winner had thought he would...
What's good, everybody? DJ TMac here for another great hip-hop conversation. You already know what it is. Back here with another independent hip-hop artist representing Denver, Colorado. He goes by the name of Old Soul Era. What's good, homie?
Oh, you know, just happy to be here, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you. I've seen you at a few shows, been listening to your music ever since, and really enjoying it. The first show that I saw you at was the Terminology show, and then most recently at your mom's house with D-Spawn. Let's first get into the Terminology show. Talk about that one, how that came together, and, you know, your thoughts on it.
Man, well, that's cool that you were out there. Very hectic show for me just because it was like kind of a last minute thing where they like reached out to me and I was like, of course, Term is in the house. Let's do it. You know, I can't say no to that. Even if it was a day before or whatever, you know, the case may be. I think it was a week before, but shout out to my boy Justice 45. He's another Denver artist. He's been doing a lot of music out here for longer than myself. He's the one who put me on, and he runs sound and hosts events there. So he was the one who linked up with Term. I'm not too sure exactly like how it happened. I think it was just through social media. But he was the one who reached out to me, Justice was, and was like, "Hey man, we need you on this show. Could you do a set for us?" And I was like, "Of course." Once I was gonna do it anyways, but once I heard it was Term, I was like, "Yeah, for sure." The River, for those who don't know, in Denver is becoming it stands out from other venues. They're very much catering to the artists. A lot of venues, and we won't name any, at least the promoters for those venues like to take advantage of underground artists. And the River really doesn't do that. And they put artists first and the music first. And beyond just music, like they bring in artists who, are graph writers, painters and things like that. And they're just like really all about getting their art out first and foremost. And if money comes with it, cool. And you can see it start progressing to like ticket sales now. But at first it was like whatever you sell, you keep 100%. And like nobody does that, especially right now. So shout out to the River. I've done a few shows there, but the Terminology was like their first big like hip hop artist that they had come through. And it was pretty fun. I mean, you were there. It was cool to see him do his thing. And on top of that, the artists that were there that night just blew me away. That was my first time meeting a handful of those artists. Hash and my boy Rose was there.
Rose, Mr. Don't Play.
Don't play. Fuck what the host say. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here.
Hey, you do whatever you want. It's conversations with T-Mac.
So yeah, long story short, that was how I got hooked up with the Terminology show. Shout out Justice. He's a super cool guy. He's one of those guys that like, if he has his foot in the door, the rest of the clan does, and that's something that I've noticed changing in the dynamic here in the underground hip hop scene. Is like it used to be like, of course there's a competitiveness to it. There's always going to be that. It's part of rap. But there's starting to be this new like reemerging energy of like, let's welcome in everybody. Anybody that's has real talent with them, let's back them up if we believe in them. And he's one of those guys that's like opened doors for a lot of us. So shout out to him.
That's really dope, man. The River is an awesome venue. I've been there a couple times. My girlfriend is the one that actually told me about it. Her friends brought her there, and I was like, damn, it sounds really cool. Ended up going there, and like you said, it stands out.
Yeah.
The look of it, the feel of it, the graffiti in the back, the art hanging throughout. I really haven't been to too many bars or venues like that in general. Right. So that's really dope. Really dope to hear about like the community aspect of the Denver hip hop scene. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like you said, Justice opening doors for people. I see a lot of the same guys on the same lineups of the shows. Just talk about the community aspect of the hip hop scene here in Denver.
Yeah. Just touching back on what I was just saying is like, there's this new energy reemerging of like from what I imagined, because I wasn't around when hip hop first came up, where it was just like, man, you got talent, you got something to say, you got some sound to provide. Let's hear it. If it's good, let's hear it. Let's put it out there. And Denver's starting to become that, where, you know, there's a lot of good hip hop out here. And kind of what we were just talking about before we turn on the camera is about, it's become easier for people to put out their music. I feel like because of that, you know, it's so easy to be scrolling through whatever social media you're using and just hear something that you like. And it's like, man, next thing you know, you might see him at a show. That's kind of how this all happened, at least from my point of view. And this is my opinion, but you hear something and then you see it live, and then you really get to see the energy of what that sounds like live. And man, it's awesome. It's as a fan of music, it's just like so humbling to be surrounded by like my crew, man. Rose, Justice, Small Boy, everybody who gets down at the River and Mutiny Cafe. You can't touch them, man. They're just so good, and they're so unique in a world of clones and sheep. Like, they're just really just being themselves, and they're comfortable being themselves. It's kind of like a Low End Theory type of vibe going on at the Mutiny and River, where it's like just heavy beat heads, boom bap. Your neck definitely hurts the night after, just from, you know.
You better stretch before.
The slappers, dude. I've learned my lesson just doing my neck cranks. But yeah, man, because of that, I feel like it's just so easy to want to include everybody. That's why you see a lot of the same lineups. And I mean, there's pros and cons to that, you know, because you could be like, oh man, I've seen this same lineup like at this other bar or at this other venue. But the fact that all these homies that I just dropped, they, like, who I just name dropped, they actually come up with music like every week with just new slappers and new bangers, and it's not the same set. You know what I mean? Rose is one of those cats that, like, he's from Little Rock. And he's been out here for, like, I want to say like a year or two.
A little over a year, yeah.
Yeah, and I bumped into him at like the Mutiny ciphers that we have there. And just instantly I gravitated towards him, and we kind of talked and mingled a little bit. And it was one of those things where it's like, hey, send me some beats, or I'll send you some beats. I don't exactly know who was the first one to initiate it, but it was immediately I got the verse right back. Like, I sent him a beat, the next day it's done. And that speaks volumes when people do that, you know, because a lot of people ask me for free beats and shit. And it's like, either they take forever to send the product back, or it just sounds like shit. And he just sent it back like the next day, and it was right up my alley. And man, I believe in him so much. Like, every time I get an opportunity to throw his name out there or put him on a bill or whatever, like, I have to, just because I believe in him so much. That's why I had him on the Spawn show. You know, I had him and Justice. Like, I'm saying, man, my crew is just nasty. And they all make their own beats and they write their own verses. You know what I mean?
Involved in many aspects of hip-hop culture.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that D-Spawn show a little bit. Talk about how that came together, first and foremost. Man,
I'm trying not to smile so hard, because that was a dream come true. Like, I couldn't have wrote that, you know. I couldn't have wrote that as a story the way it happened. I couldn't have dreamed it even better. Yeah, so without taking too much time, I don't know how much time you got for this.
Hey, we got a lot of time, man.
Cool.
We a long format show for a reason. So, you know, we're here to let you speak.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'll tell you how it happened, and I'll tell you how much it meant to me. The way it happened was DJ Stage One, the Sure Shot brother. He reached out to me through social media. We started following each other. He started commenting cool things, really nice things about my music. And when I saw the plethora of work he's done, I was just like, oh man, this guy's like bigging me up. You know, you kind of get flattered and you kind of get humbled too, you know? And he reached out to me one time. It was like, send me some beats and send me some joints. And then he asked me for my number. And then out of nowhere, he's like, hey man, I got Spawn like with me right now. He can call you. And at first I hadn't heard that name in forever and a day, you know? He had changed his name to like Wreck the Heavyweight after the Atmosphere thing. And I didn't even know he was making music. You know, by this time in my life, I hadn't really listened to too much Atmosphere, even though it was a big part of my childhood. So when he threw that name at me, at first I was like, D-Spawn, like what? You know? And then when I put two and two together and I started scrolling through homie's Instagram and saw that he was hanging out with like Slug and Spawn, and I was like, oh shit, that's Spawn. You know what I mean? You want to call me like right now? Like I'm at work. Like, all right, I'm gonna take a quick break. And sure enough, like I get a call and it's Spawn on the phone. And I'm just like, man, try not to geek out, try not to fangirl, you know? Because yeah, man, I did idolize that guy for so much, and I tried to emulate his sound when I first started messing with one of these microphones. And the fact that he was on the phone with me talking about, hey man, your sound is cool, like we should put something together. Never in a million years, you know, man. So
that's fire.
Yeah,
that's cool. That
like
must be a really cool feeling.
Yeah, the one guy, you know, the one person that I really was like reignited my love for hip hop just doesn't happen. And if it wasn't for social media, like who knows, you know? Social media has its pros and cons, and if it wasn't for that, who knows what would have happened. But yeah, he reached out to me, and this was like 2017, 2018. So we were talking about like putting a project together or like a few songs or something. I don't really remember the conversation too good, but because I was like freaking out. But he did say he wanted to come out here. And so did Stage One. And I was like, man, let's make that happen. I'm going to figure out how to make that happen. Next thing you know, COVID happened.
So this was before COVID, actually.
This was right before COVID, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, we're a couple years out from that phone call and sort of exchange happening at this point. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and I had dropped like a teaser on Instagram just to like, because I knew Spawn hadn't been making too much new music in a while, so I wanted to like kind of start a little fire, you know,
a little buzz.
Yeah, and sure enough, the ones who knew, like, you know, were like, wait, what? You're fucking around, right? And I was like, man, you know, I didn't want to use like his name to try to get likes or anything like that, but I was just so excited that I like wanted to let at least the homies know who knew who Spawn was, like, this is about to happen. And then he had some medical issues happen too that I don't really want to speak on, but if you follow him, I'm sure it's on his page and stuff. And so that deterred us that stopped us for a while. That put everything on hold, making sure his health was good and everything. And once he felt better, he hit me back up, him and Stage One, and they were like, hey man, let's do this for real. Like, it's now or never, you know, let's get it going. And this was just at the beginning of this year. So yeah, that's how that came to be. I reached out to, you know, a couple people, and one of the promoters from Your Mom's House reached out to me and was like, yeah, we can do that. Let's make it happen. And so that's how that came to be. But still tripping on it because, you know, he came out here, he stayed in my crib. We recorded some music. For those of you who don't know, there's some Also Era, Spawn, DJ Stage One, and Rose music coming out.
Ooh, okay, be on the lookout.
Yeah, and so again, that's my dream come true, you know? I don't really do this for music or for fame. To me, I've made it. Like, that was it. That's all I've ever wanted, and I didn't even think that was achievable. And here I am kicking it with my hero, you know what I mean? And he was just super sweet and humble, and I got to show him around Denver. We went to Mutiny, went to River. River was closed, but we got to see the outside of it, and they were blown away, and definitely want to come back and do something there with them. But yeah, man, that was crazy, especially because when Atmosphere first dropped that record, I wasn't really listening to hip hop at the time like that. Overcast, and that was the record that Spawn was on. It wasn't until flash forward till I was like in my 16, 15, 17-year-old kid. I had taken a trip. I was like heavy into a punk rock phase, like super punk, super metal. And I'm still, to my core, like my heart is definitely punk rock. I come back from a trip from Mexico, and all of a sudden all my friends smoked weed. And they didn't before. It was all just smoking cigs. And all of a sudden they're listening to hip hop like they've never listened to before. And I was in my best friend Adam's basement, and he threw on Overcast. And yeah, Spawn came on. You know, I like Slug, but when Spawn came on, it was just so, I didn't know that was allowed. I didn't know you were allowed to sound like that in hip hop, or say those certain things, or have that cadence, or be poetic. Other than Tupac, I was never exposed to anything like lyrical like that. And so that was my first time really hearing that type of vocabulary and said in that type of way, you know, in those phrases, and blew my mind. I just kept fucking listening to it over and over. He's got like 4 or 5 songs on there. And I just kept listening to his verses over and over, and just like, man, why does this sound like it's so familiar but so different? And it just sounded, because of the beats that they rapped over, it was just so jazzy too, you know? And my love for jazz flourished from that. Yeah. So again, going back from my high school days, listening to Atmosphere with my friend Adam, and listening to Spawn over and over and over, and trying to kind of emulate that cadence a little bit, and then hanging out with him, you know, in my 30s, like, would have never guessed that, man.
Crazy, like full circle moment almost,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about that being like a dream come true. You don't really do music for fame, or, you know, to get on like that. So, and you being an independent hip hop artist out here, what are like some of your goals as an artist? You know, working with, you know, somebody who you looked up to and idolized for a long time already. What are you looking to do next?
Man, that's a crazy question, because I don't really look too far ahead. I just know I want to keep making music as long as the universe allows me to make music. I do want to play Red Rocks, and I'm going to make that happen one day, somehow, some way. But I want it to happen naturally. I don't want to ask for it, because I know I could ask for it. I know some people, but I want it to happen naturally, where they ask me. That would be a dream come true, as far as like attaining something. But other than that, man, I'm cool. I just want to keep making music and living my life, you know, raising my kids. And yeah, I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, or if it was not articulate enough, but
no, whatever answer you give, that's the answer, man. That's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to determine, you know, what artists are trying to do sometimes. As we talked about, you know, sort of the underground versus the mainstream, the lines are sort of blurred almost, right? Everything's available on streaming platforms. Everything's sort of advertised the same way on social media now, or, you know, in a similar fashion, to where you know what it is and it's recognizable.
I don't want to make music like I need to. I really need to make music. If I'm not making music, I don't want to be here, you know? And it's hard to admit that, especially as a dad, because like they rely on me. But I just don't. I don't know. That's been my escape, and that's been my
say like an outlet. That's what it sounds like to me.
It's just like breathing, you know. And so hip hop isn't the only thing I make. Like I make all kinds of different music. It's just that for me, it was so much more. It was easier to get over my voice, because I don't like my voice. It was easier to get over my voice with hip hop, and I had made hip hop for a good minute that nobody ever heard or will ever hear. But it took a few of my really close friends to be like, man, you should be putting this shit out, you know? And that was never my goal. And if it wasn't for my first show, I might have never gotten that taste. But once I got the taste of performing, I was hooked. I was like, it was like I grew up skateboarding heavy, and it was like the closest similar feeling I could find to when you landed something crazy, you know, just like tray flip a fucking 5-stair or whatever, you know. It was that feeling of like, I guess, adrenaline, but also a purpose. And so I got hooked to performing, you know. Yeah.
Dope, man. There's a dope connection between hip hop and skateboarding. Also, we've had that conversation here on the channel with Windsor James, pro skateboarder from out here, who I didn't know. I just knew him from music. But seeing like highlights and stuff like that, it's pretty cool to talk to him about, you know, that connection between skateboarding and hip hop. You know, many different connections. We're gonna try to get into one later.
Cool.
But we'll put a pin in that.
Awesome.
So you said you've been making music for a long time, different styles of music. You were born in Los Angeles, California, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when did you move out to Colorado?
I think it was like 98 or 99.
So you were
pretty young. I was like around 10 or 11.
Okay. When did you start making music?
Well, my first instrument.
Let me rephrase that. What was like your first music experience?
Yeah, it's a better question. Thank you. Because I would have gotten lost either way. Since I was born, literally, I'm surrounded by musicians. All my uncles and cousins, they have bands of their own, and they're all, touring the States. They play norteño music, some mariachi music, just hardcore Mexican music. And every single one of my uncles that I can remember growing up was either singing or playing some instrument. My mom, beautiful voice, she's always singing. And so that was my first introduction, like from the get-go, from the womb. I'm sure my mom was going to fiestas all the time with me in there and me just bobbing my head in there. And so I was always surrounded by musicians. They were always rehearsing in our garage, on our porch. Just last Christmas, we were watching like home videos. And there was a video of me, like, had to be 3 or 4 years old, just front row at my sister's quinceañera. And my cousins and my uncles were jamming. She brought them as the live band for the evening, and it's just a video of me just front row. Nobody else is on the dance floor yet, just rocking back and forth, getting down for like a good 5-6 songs, just back and forth. Kids are running around playing, and they come and try to like talk to me like, "Hey, come play, let's play tag." And I'm like distracted for a second, but then I look back at the stage and I'm just like rocking. And it was so crazy seeing that, just because it's like, man, you could see it in my little face there, in my eyes. Like, it was just, I was so enamored. It was in me. So I've been around music forever. Never got around to actually playing an instrument till I moved here. But I was writing. I remember my brother's tape collection. And they had like, back in the day, not new school, but old school Little Rob, Kid Frost, some Chicano rap. Of course, All Eyes on Me, Dear Mama was probably the first song that I memorized. And so I would just recite Dear Mama, Tupac, over and over. And once I got the patterns down, even as a little kid, I started writing like that, started writing like bars. It just made me want to write. Whether I knew if it was poetry or not, I don't know. I just knew that I wanted to write whatever I was thinking. Then when I moved here, like I said, I picked up my first instrument, which was a saxophone, and a few of my cousins played the saxophone. So I picked it up in school band and started jamming, just like whatever they teach you in school, Christmas music and stuff like that. And no jazz, unfortunately, that I can remember. But yeah, I was heavy into it, and my uncles, whenever they were passing through Denver touring or whatever, they were like super into me playing the saxophone and kind of setting me up on that path, and would teach me, a few songs, a few Spanish songs. But once I started skateboarding, unfortunately, I saw the saxophone as like a geeky thing, which I regret, because to this day, it's still my favorite instrument. One of my favorite artists of all time, Fela Kuti, Nigerian jazz artist. He rocks the sax like a motherfucker, and I'm still looking to get my rebound and buying another sax. But I dropped the sax. Once I started skateboarding, I was introduced to punk rock and fell in love with the guitar. So got a guitar, started playing guitar, started playing punk. And that was like really the first instrument I took serious, was my guitar. So that was like the first time I can remember being like, yeah, I'm a musician, writing my own songs.
Okay.
A lot of them were just punk based.
It was like teenage years, probably, you would say?
Yeah, for sure. Like 12, 13 years old. Yeah. And so that led into punk rock, actually led into death metal, because I like the really hardcore thrash punk. I listened to Blink-182 as well, Green Day. But like once I found bands like Anti-Flag or The Casualties and NoFX and Black Flag, like I was gravitating towards the harder parts of their songs. So that led into death metal, and I wanted that screaming all the time. once I got into death metal, I saw a connection between the way their guitarists were playing certain melodies that were really jazzy. And at the same time, simultaneously, my friend Adam, who got me into hip hop again, with the Atmosphere record, his pops, who also plays the saxophone, would play the sax in his garage and also play along to 89.3, which is our jazz station out here, KUVO 89.3. So that was my introduction to that station. And because I was already kind of like figuring out that there was some jazz melodies going on over here in the music I was listening to with death metal, I was like also kind of hearing what was going on in the garage at Adam's house. And so his pops, man, shout out to his pops, Tom, man. He introduced us to 89.3 and we just lost it. We were like so in love with the way this sounded, this station. And on certain nights, on Wednesdays, they would play this thing called like Hip Hop Odyssey. I don't know if they still do it or not, but Venus Cruz, shout out Venus, she would host this thing. And my boy Chris Torres, he would host this thing called like Wednesday Odyssey, I think is what it was called. And they would play like Flying Lotus and just like JD and stuff like that. And so not only was it like a heavy jazz station, but at night they would give it up to the hip hop jazz stuff. So I was
That's cool.
making
That's really
that, I was making that connection again, where it's like, wait, how come this sounds so familiar to me? And listening to Coltrane and Dizzy Gillespie and things like that, I started hearing things that I was hearing in hip hop, you know, and I was completely oblivious to what sampling was.
That's such a great feeling once you like sort of realize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like good and bad, right?
Yeah.
It was, at least for me, because like, not that like your perception is shattered, but you're just like, all this music is not like original music, or it didn't come from these like hip hop artists. Not that I thought that they were making beats, or I didn't know where hip hop music was coming from. Are there really guitarists like playing in the studio for all these songs? Like, how are they really coming together? So for me, learning about sampling, and it was Between the Sheets, the Isley Brothers, to Biggie Smalls' Big Papa. When I first heard that Isley Brothers being played, I was like, whoa, that was total mind-blowing situation for me. So that sounds like exactly what you're talking about right here.
Yeah, for me, I think it might have been easier to accept just because like some of my favorite death metal songs were covers. One of my favorite bands, the number 12 Looks Like You, has a cover song from My Sharona from the Knack, which is like My Sharona, but they're like screaming it. And so it was like, I just gravitated towards that. And so for me, it was okay. A lot of my uncles and stuff who tour were doing cover songs. Yeah. And so for me, it was kind of no different, except the fact that fast forward to now that I know how like hard it is to get a good sample going, you know, to actually sample good and make it sound your own, like your own instrument. Because there's loops and stuff too, where you just straight loop it, right? But once I dove into sampling and was like, man, there's some real intricate stuff going on, like layering 3-4 different genres of music or instruments and meshing it into one thing. But yeah, I think it was easy for me to accept it, and I wanted more. I started digging, literally, and that was like my complete turnaround from going from listening to Chicano rap and hip hop, West Coast hip hop mostly, because of my brothers. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, going to this punk rock phase, death metal phase, and then all the way back to hip hop again. I was just like, I rediscovered myself through music, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I really like how you put that. So let's talk about your style a little bit. You know, we talked about, some musical influences right there, how you got your style.
Yeah.
You pointed out some of these records, some of your favorites you said.
Yeah.
Some people that you probably took influence from. But let's talk about your musical style a little bit. It's a pretty stripped back style, I would say. Classic hip hop style. I mean, the name is Old Soul Era. I'm going to ask you to just break that down and kind of how you came to that. Yeah. But talk about, your style a little bit for people who haven't heard you. Describe it a little bit for them.
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's some Atmosphere spawn influences in there, like we spoke about. To me, even though I was raised, my first introduction was West Coast gangster rap, and my brothers are gangsters. It was easy for me to gravitate towards that. But moving here, realizing that, hey, I'm not a gangster, and I don't want to ever be a gangster, and it's okay that my brothers are. I don't have to be like my brothers. Finding my own identity. Once I found out that it was okay to use hip hop in a different light, and you don't have to be gangster, there was like this knowledge to it, right? This knowledge, spread the knowledge vibe. For me, it was like, man, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted just to be myself. I fancy myself as a seeker of knowledge and just learning different things about how things work and how the world works. And so it was easy for me to at least lyrically just go that route and be myself and not have to pretend to be this person I'm not, like be a gangster when I'm not. You know, you see a lot of that right now. People just think it's cool to rap about negative things because it's cool, even though they don't necessarily implement those things in their life themselves. But yeah, so I think that was like my main influence when I got back into hip hop, was listening to music like that, that had something, I guess, real to say, something positive to say, something educational, and just more, what's the word? Almost like a journalist, you know. They were always artists who were reflecting the times that were happening right then and there that I gravitated towards.
Yeah, the street reporters.
Exactly. And that's not necessarily just the street, because I wasn't like living in the hard streets. By this time I was already, you know, in the suburbs of Colorado, but just reflecting on the world and the existence and the experiences of being alive. So that was definitely one of the things that influenced my sound. But I think if you listen close enough, my biggest influences are definitely indie bands. Bands like Modest Mouse and Built to Spill. Even though I'm making hip hop, somewhere in here, there's that. And that resonates through my lyrics and the things I decide to speak about. Sonically, if you're just listening to my beats, I mean, you named it, and we're looking at it, you know, some of my influences here, Madlib and Dilla. My first introduction to them wasn't until way later. I was kind of late to the game because I had put it on the back burner. You know, rap had become this thing around that time with like Lil Wayne, and not to knock on any of that, but it was
the bling era.
Yeah, the bling era. It was something that I wasn't interested or I couldn't relate to it, and I was not going to force myself. You know, I'm not going to lie and say I never bobbed my head to one or two of those songs, but as far as like listening to it on my Walkman, never, no chance, you know. I think I was watching Adult Swim one night. Some weird shit was on. I think it was Moral Oral or there was some weird shit on late at nights there. Maybe it was Robot Chicken. And like there was this glitch, you know how, I don't know if you remember how Adult Swim went to commercial, and there's like glitches of words and sometimes like lo-fi music to it, and all of a sudden Doom came on with Madlib, and it was like a short little live concert that they posted on Adult Swim. And I was up late at night when I was like 1 a.m. or something, and I like happened to catch this, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I need to look.
Must be mind-blowing.
Dude, it's, you know, especially to be late in the game to it. Like, people already knew who this was. I didn't know who he was. So here I am, staying up even later on a school night, fucking looking up on LimeWire, you know, trying to download shit. Like, who's this Doom character? And just went through this rabbit hole, you know, as I'm sure anybody who first hears Doom and enjoys his sound. You know, speaking of sampling, that guy just changed me forever. He changed me. So I first found out about Doom and Madlib, then Stone's Throw, then J Dilla, and then one of my heroes, you know, who I hold to the highest standard, is Peanut Butter Wolf and Charisma. And so it was all through this Adult Swim thing. I don't know if I would have found it maybe later, since I was already doing hip hop.
Interesting. So interesting to find it like through that channel, pardon the pun.
Yes.
But like,
yeah.
You know, in that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And because this was still around that time where I was like discovering the jazz for the first time, and discovering that they were using that hip hop was using some of those samples. And so when I heard the way Doom was doing it, using samples from cartoons that my brothers grew up watching and introducing me to, like Johnny Quest and the old Godzillas and, you know, all the Marvel cartoons that they had back in the day, just blew my mind, you know. Again, I didn't think that was allowed. You didn't hear that in the mainstream or the gangster rap. And so for this person to really be touching this part of my soul, you know, like sonically, I was just blown away. And so I wanted to kind of emulate that, but in my own style. So with sampling, you know, and the old soul vibe is obviously resonating and touching back on those influences, but still talking about things that are relevant to me personally. So that's how I came up with the sound.
Talk about the name. How'd the name come about?
Yeah, man. So the name was actually a song name. So I used to go by something else. I think it's like The Marvelous Truth or something. I was just like straight to the point. Like, I'm going to tell you guys about the marvelous truth.
You guys are knowing what you're about to get.
And I used to get shit all the time. Like, oh, you're one of those conscious rappers, huh? And I'm like, I read books. Like, sure. You know what I mean? I like to read. But, yeah, it was a song name. And so by this time I was already using SoundCloud as The Marvelous Truth. And I had a beat tape that I put out. I think it was like 24 songs, 24 beats. And it was just, I was sampling everything, not just jazz. You know, I was sampling indie, I was sampling guitar. And one of the songs was named Old Soul Era. And one of my homies from back in the day from high school, Ari, he like commented on that and was like, man, what is that? That shit is hard. Like, that shit goes hard. What is that? I want more of that. Not just like the way it sounded, but the name. He was talking about the name. And so, you know, it just brought me back to conversations I had with my grandpa about like the earth and how I looked at the world and the way people are. And he mentioned to me that he's like, oh, you have a alma vieja, which is an old soul. And so it just stuck to me, you know, and so it just made sense. And then I whipped up the logo, that tree with the one leaf, just because I wanted to reference the time of the year I was born. I was born in November. And I mean, there's a beauty in like things dying and then being reborn. And so I wanted to have this logo representing that. So it's a dying tree, but there's like one leaf left on it. And it just went with that name of Old Soul Era. And then years later, somebody sent me a picture of a bottle of wine, and it says Old Soul, and it's got a big fucking tree, like a dying tree on it. Wow. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why aren't did they steal my, like, I think we spent one night like looking up when they came up with theirs, and it was like the same year I came up with my shit. Obviously there's no way they saw mine and I didn't see theirs, but it was just so fucking similar. It's black and white too. And I'm like, man, you guys should like endorse me, or like, you know? Yeah,
there's a weird like thing in the air sometimes, right? Consciousness and, you know, people grabbing things out of it and, you know, coming up with similar things. That's pretty funny though. Interesting coincidence there. Before we sort of get off the JD talk and stuff like that, I have an interesting story about this record that I don't think I've had the opportunity to tell on camera yet. Awesome. So when I first got it, this was before streaming platforms were really popular. So I never actually heard Donuts. I don't think I heard much JD, but I heard the name J Dilla a lot. So when I first got a record player, I was not even in the record store yet, but I was like, I need to order something online. You know what I mean? Like, what am I missing? I felt like I'm missing this part of hip hop culture, like this vinyl turntable aspect of it. So I went crazy. I bought a whole bunch of records online. Them being like the 3-pack, the first 3 of like A Tribe Called Quest, the Fugees, like J Dilla, a few others. Sick. And like I said, I never really heard J Dilla music before. So when I put it on the turntable, I thought it was skipping. I thought something was wrong with the record. Wow. I was like, what's going on here? Like, what are these sounds? Is it skipping? There's no like rhythm to it. Like, what is going on here? And to finally like come around, listening to it, being exposed to it more, you know, just digging more into hip hop. Like now this is like one of my favorite projects ever. Wow. So it's interesting how that all comes around and the jazz aspect of it. You mentioned not like being in band in school and not having a jazz band. I actually was in jazz band in like middle school. Wow. So I think that subconsciously like influenced me into liking some of the music I like. Obviously Tribe, like I just mentioned, Fugees, a lot of jazz heavy stuff. Like Pete Rock, that song Troy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Those horns, like that just hits me on the inside, as I'm sure it does you. So let's talk about making music a little bit. You know, you talked about digging in the records. That's something that you still actively do. You know, with us having the internet now, you have access to a lot more songs theoretically than are in the record store or that you have in your collection at home.
Yeah.
So how do you like to dig? What's sort of your process in putting together records?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome, man, that you thought it was skipping. I'm sure a lot of different people were like, you know.
It's really a mind-blowing experience. It was really crazy.
I mean, like the greatest musicians get that. I feel like when they come out with stuff, like it's just like, is this allowed? Is this proper? Is this going on? One of my favorite artists, Neil Young. You know, some people really hate his voice. Bob Dylan, they don't like their voices. And you know, the rest of us are like, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever heard. And there's people who are like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's just messing up these records. What is he doing, making these random sounds? And the rest of us are like, it's the best thing, the best shit I've ever heard, and we'll ever hear. I mean, he's the Dalai Lama, you know what I mean? But yeah, so digging now, it's everything you just mentioned. Sometimes I do go digging for records. I have my collection of records at home. I got my turntables. I taught myself how to DJ, and so I felt like that was important for me because of what I was already doing. I felt like I had a lot of catching up to do, and my brothers weren't into the music I was listening to, and they've already, you know, were way older than me. I was the so our age gap is pretty significant. So I being an introvert and just like a fucking hermit, I didn't really have access to like people teaching me things. So YouTube University was my outlet online and stuff, and learning things online. But I taught myself how to DJ. My first record ever came to me on accident. I used to be a Goodwill attendant when I was like 17. And Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon was donated. And so I copped that, took it home. Didn't have a record player yet, but I just was like looking at the fucking cover and shit, remembering how CDs used to make me feel, because by this time we all had iPods and stuff. And so that really started my love for records, was this Pink Floyd record, and made it my duty to find a record player so I could play it on. And I did some janky ass one. And then I started, because I was still at Goodwill and they donate a lot of old records and old stuff. I just kept bringing records home and listening to them. And this was before I was even sampling. I was just listening to records. I've always felt like I belonged in a different time. So like, hence the name. And so for me, I would just sit there, you know, blowing some smoke and listening to records and stuff, and playing video games on mute so I could listen to the record. So that's like how my love for crate digging really started, from just listening to them. Then later I figured out how to sample them. But as of now, yeah, sometimes it's the internet. Sometimes I hear something on the internet. Sometimes it's someone's video. Somebody just posts a home video and shares it, and I'm like, I want to sample whatever word that person just said. Sometimes it's cartoons. My sons are watching something weird on their tablets.
A lot of quotes in like the beginning and ends of songs. Yeah, a lot of like different stuff.
Yeah, it's part of the narrative for sure. They're like, it's all art. Somebody wrote those, you know, and somebody took the time to write that and express that, and I just want to regurgitate it in my own way, you know. Little snippets. Sometimes I just play them out as is, and sometimes I take certain words and reframe a sentence, like, you know, how Doom taught us how to do. And sometimes I sample things that are just like around the room, you know, like a can or something that I teach my students, because I teach sampling classes, beat making classes at the Lakewood Cultural Center. Something that I try to teach them is like, first day, I don't expect you guys to take this class and just be like producers. If you know, maybe you're just taking this because your parents signed you up or because you thought it was a cool class to take. But there's more to sound design than just making beats. There's also electronic sounds. There's also somebody getting paid to make the sound of a lightsaber for Star Wars. And so I start off the class explaining that, showing some videos on YouTube of like sound designers literally taking things around the room. So one of my first projects for them the first day is like, I want you to go around the room and see how many different samples you can capture. And then they do that, and then, you know, they have all these random sounds on their phone or tablets, whatever we're sampling on. And then I teach them how to add effects and how to manipulate them or just break them down into sections to make them make melodies off of these random sounds. So, yeah, I sample from anything. Obviously, it's become a lot more easier with the internet. And with Ableton and my samplers, I can just, I don't recommend copyright stuff, like stealing that shit. But fuck it.
It's a weird thing, especially like in the underground scene. A lot of the things that I hear from artists who have been around a long time, who they say do it until, somebody sends a letter saying something. That's when, like, it's time to maybe start clearing it and doing things like that. But it's an interesting, time, right? Because TrackLib is also available. Tracklib.com. You familiar with that? What are your thoughts on that? The music's already cleared. So I've talked to some producers who are like, man, I hate that. Like, I do all the time to dig and do all this stuff. And not that they don't want to give credit to the originators, but they're like, this is my art. I'm flipping it and making it my own and theoretically bringing people back to your record. People like me, I go searching for the original. So what are your thoughts on like TrackLib and the state of sampling today?
Yeah, that's a great question. My thoughts are there's no rules and nothing is ours. We all are going to die one day. And I mean, I get it. If you believe that something is really yours and somebody steals it, I mean, you have the right to act on it. We have a home, and if somebody comes into our home or threatens our family or tries to take something that's mine, obviously we're going to have some sort of reaction to it. But the best music, and if you ask real musicians this, the best music is not ours. My best songs are the songs that just come out of the ether, where it's just somehow, some way, I can't even explain how they came to be. They just were given to me by another entity. Those are the best songs. And a lot of the artists that I worship and listen to probably have the same, and I've heard other artists say that this song just kind of came to me. Those are my best songs. There's some songs where like somebody just sent me a beat and I wrote, my 16 to it because I could, and, and there's that. But the ones that I consider real songs, those came to me. So because...
Can you give me an example of a few of those songs? I don't mean to cut you off, but I'd love to know like what a few of those songs are.
Yeah, everything I've made. Everything there's
a whole lot on Spotify, man. It'll take a lot for the people to get through the catalog.
Yeah, everything that's on Spotify I've made, and that's all. Those are all completely real songs. The ones that I was talking about that might not be as real, that I just kind of came up because somebody gave me something. I had to quickly write a 16, or I got put on the spot or whatever. Because I don't work that way. I don't like to just get put on the spot, even though I can, and I've done great at it, My best work is alone usually.
Different process.
Yeah, different process, or somebody I really trust. I can work with them in the room, but for the most part alone. So everything that's out right now on Spotify, there's some stuff on SoundCloud that you can find under Also Era or The Marvelous Truth that are just like over other people's beats. And I mean, the lyrics are mine, but because they're other people's beats, I don't feel like it was as organic as this meditative state that I get into when I'm making my songs that are all out under my
start to finish.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Definitely a different feeling, different process, 100%.
Right, but there's no rules. So back to this TrackLib thing, I think it's awesome. I attended this seminar by the legendary Ninth Wonder, who I know you're very familiar with, my man.
Got a close connection.
Yes, man. I seen you.
Shout out Moose.
Yes, shout out Moose. I went to the seminar. I think it was in what's the name of that fucking college? Metro State University, where he hosted this seminar about sampling, and he was, forgive me for not being able to quote him exactly how he said it, but he was talking about how we all heard of Martin Luther King as a representative for something positive for black culture. maybe Rosa Parks, and depending on which side of the country you were on, maybe Malcolm X in school, if that. Other than that, who else did they teach us about that was African American in school? You know, all of the people that we were taught to idolize were all like slave owners, you know, and white and just bad people if you really got down to the core of it, you know what I mean? And if it wasn't for hip hop, this is how he was putting it, he would have never found who John Coltrane was. You know what I mean? Sun Ra.
James Brown. Like,
James Brown, yeah. Maybe because of TV, but in school.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, nobody in school was teaching this shit. And so if it wasn't for television or sampling or hip hop or music in general, he might have never found that. But through sampling, he was able to touch roots, you know, that he was never taught in school, and made him proud to be who he was and where he came from. And to me, that was huge, because for those few black folks that I mentioned, I didn't learn about any Mexican folks, you know? And so I felt like we were robbed of that, you know, from learning from that. So whenever I see someone musical from another country, like, man, it blows me away that, like, because like America for the longest time was like the hub, the mecca of the music world, of the entertainment world, right? But we were so, you know, shame on us for at least the ones who weren't giving the light of day to like Brazilian jazz or Japanese blues, because they got some crazy shit. Even though they were kind of trying to emulate us, they took what we started and just went with it. I'm sure, you know, if you go to Europe right now, like they're still in the 90s with hip hop.
Yeah, their love for hip hop is on a different level. Not that I've been there, but just from seeing things and seeing how artists talk about how they are appreciated over there, it's a different level. Yeah.
And so now that we, again, back to the conversation of TrackLib, now that we have access to things like that, I think it's awesome, man. I think there's no rules. It's all game. Like, now that social media exists and music and information and media can just be spread at the click of a button, just like that, nothing is really ours. As soon as you put it on the cloud, it's into the universe, into the electrodes, into the fucking vibrations, you know, as it should be. You should be getting paid for things that you made on your own if that's what you want. But we're going to take it. We're all going to take it from you because it's now ours.
Regardless.
I had
This is hip hop.
Quick funny story I had when I was in college. My music business teacher, I forget his fucking name, but he was like super anti-hip hop. He'd go around the room like first day, like asking, "Oh, what do you guys listen to? Raise your hand if you listen to this. Raise your hand if you listen to that. Who listens to hip hop?" And then he would pick you out like, "Oh, these are the fucking, they're just here to learn how to make hip hop." Yeah. And he was like a heavy jazz guy, bassist, and hated sampling and just thought it was like stealing. So one of the students in class found Homeboy's music online, flipped it, and brought it in as his final project.
Yo,
and
that's some balls.
And he was like, "What is this? This is so good, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "It's you, motherfucker. Like, this is your shit."
Wow, he flipped his stuff and he didn't even know.
Made it sound better, too. And
damn,
it happens, man.
Wow, that's crazy. That's a cool story right there, man. Hip-hop is amazing. It really is. Let's talk about your latest released album, Relic and Rhyme.
Yes.
Released February of 2022.
Yes, sir.
I like it. I like it for many reasons. It's a solid body of work.
Thank you.
You know, it's true to your style and you know, your ideas and what you want to represent. Talk about the process of putting this album together. What was like the initial spark, the first thing that set this one off?
Yeah, I think for this one, I just really wanted to put something else out. It was just one of those things where it's like, it's time. It's time to put something else out. And I had like a good collection of songs, maybe like 3 or 4 that were just like on repeat whenever I like wanted to listen to my own stuff. And I'm like, man, I got to do something with these, but it needs more to it. So that's when I started like if I put these into an album, into a project, then it'll force me to like finish it out. And so that's kind of how it happened. It was maybe like 4 songs that weren't like mastered or anything, but they had just been recorded and mapped out and skeletons of them. And I was like, man, I need to build on this. So that's how it started. It was also like my second or third project making while living with my girl. So my previous projects were just living when I was still living at home and in this basement just by myself. Now, because like the house that we have is so like open, we're all just right there face to face. She was part of that process, so it was a little hard for me because I don't like being looked at when I'm making music, and I don't like.
You said you like being alone when you're creating.
Very much so. So I had to get used to, and I had already done like a few other projects, but like the homeboys were coming over, dropping verses, or I would map out a beat while they were writing. So it was like a community type of thing, even though my girl was there. But because like let's say this is my little setup here, like the kitchen's right there, and then the living room is where that chair is. Like, so she's right there watching me. I had to get curtains and stuff. So as far as the process, it was a little different. I was sneaking away to do it while she was asleep, or I was also doing it like on lunch breaks. So I would come home because nobody was home and record a verse. You know, I'd practice it and voice memo it over a beat. Once I got it down or whatever, I would come and record my verses, because making beats in front of people, like, I don't really care. But when it comes time to writing, I really need to just be alone, or it doesn't mean anything. You know, it doesn't mean as much. That's what I was going back to, like when people would send me beats, or when I was writing to beats that were like on YouTube or online or whatever. Even though I was expressing myself, it wasn't as magical as like just being alone and grabbing from the ether again. So the process was kind of different this time around. I don't want to say it was forced, but it was definitely like, if I put these into a project, it's going to force me
it's like
in a way.
Concerted effort to really do it. And, you know, you had to plan it out.
Yeah.
It's not just like it was available whenever, and you could go and float over to it when you felt it. Real concerted effort, I would say.
Yes. And then I think it took me a little longer than normal to like put them in order, because I still believe in concepts. And even though I didn't go into this one in particular, like this is a concept album, I already had 4 random tracks that I just felt kind of made sense together. It took me a while to kind of put them in order, because I still believe that that's like a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I love a good sequence.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why there's a side A and B, you know, like the midpoint of the record should be that point where you're supposed to turn the record over or flip your tape over. And so I really wanted that feeling still, and I hope that whoever, you know, listens to my music listens to it from 1 to 12 or whatever.
Don't come at me with no shuffle. All right.
No. My shit is not made to shuffle. And if you do, cool. But like when you first listen to the project, everybody's going to have their favorites. But like there's a reason why I put the samples of like the voice recordings and stuff and like movies and stuff in the way that I do. Because sometimes they'll come to me where it's like, this song needs something. What does it need? Oh yeah, remember that funny movie? Like there's that one part, and it just kind of makes sense while you're flowing. But then there's also times where like the project is done and I still feel like there's a missing narrative, and sometimes that one phrase or sound or even conversation of a movie or something I saw online or whatever, something nostalgic, it just needs it. And so I do that after the songs are all set and in stone.
Yeah, man, I love a good sequence. Some of my favorites off of the album are Wolfpack, Jaguar Paw, and Fearless Vicious.
Man,
those are some of my favorites.
Those are good ones. Yeah, Wolfpack, Rose, Mr. Don't Play, man.
Shout out to Rose, a few features on there.
Yeah, man, I love.
You guys are real well together. I'm waiting for the collab album. All right, I'm putting that out there.
It's coming.
Let's go.
It's coming, Rose. Yeah, I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said about homie? Like he's so unique. He sounds like him. He sounds like Rose. And he's just a super sweet person, and you know, I really like being around him. He makes music fun. he makes me want to make music. When we host our ciphers and stuff, him and the rest of the crew, they blow me away every time. I go home, even though it's late at night, still wanting to beat, still hungry, still wanting to make beats and stuff.
Energized off of it.
They influenced me. So yeah, Wolfpack was just one of those where I sent him a beat and he was like, yeah, I'm on it. And, came back with the verses and stuff. So, and then Fearless Vicious, man, that was like one of those things where like the sample hit me. And I've heard that sample somewhere else after I've already put the record out. Okay. And I was kind of bummed about that. But obviously, I mean, it doesn't belong to us and I'm sampling it. Why the fuck wouldn't somebody else sample it? But yeah, that sample just hit me in a certain way where like it made me think about, one of my loved ones. And so I don't know if you caught on to it, but it's a conversation between me and him. So the first verse is me and how I feel about him and stuff and us growing up. And then the second verse is his rebuttal to me.
Days passed me by, left my life somewhere behind. Games I was trying, left oh boy,
It started young, it's part of what the language is. It's hard to love in the city of Los Angeles, with all the scandalous, amorous, the scavengers. You and I were dwelling in the melting of the dangerous. Our joy was flavorless, almost indescribable. Our food was paid for less, with lessons of the Bible though. And though we didn't know it, our love would always show it. Partners of the crime in the times that we were growing. When shit was slowing, instead of moving faster, kid. Miss how it was when we were living life disastrous. Skating past the hours with J. Howard right where Adam lived. Hungry we devour any coward that was adamant. It makes me sad within to dwell about the past. Just hope you know I miss you and I wish that we could laugh. But for now I'll keep it real and just write about our past. I'ma tell them how I feel with the wisdom that I have. Word.
When angels are forced out of heaven, they become devils. You agree, don't you?
But then the way the song ends with the samples that I chose, which was Cowboy Bebop, not the anime series, but the Netflix series they put out, the live action series. If you kind of listen to it, the sample at the end kind of makes you second think, was it me on the first and him on the second, or was it just me having a conversation with myself, or the other way around? Was it him on the so it's like one of those things where it's like it could have been either or, where he chose the hard life, and I didn't, I'm still here. And so it was one of those things. So that song means a lot to me, so that's cool that's one of your
man, I picked up on that one, one of the first few listens. Talk about the title of this one, Relic and Rhyme.
Relic and Rhyme.
You said, sort of, not necessarily like a concept album, it means this, you got to put all this together. Yeah. But where does the title come from?
That came last, which never happens for my previous projects. Yeah, that one came in last. So I was thinking of like, what do I call this now that I put it together? Because again, those 4 songs or whatever were already, sitting there, and I just needed to add to it. So once I put what I thought was a complete project together, it needed a title. And the word relic kind of referenced the old soul era type thing, like relic, ancient times, antiquity. So I was kind of playing with those words. And I'm a huge fan of like alliteration. And so Relic and Rhyme, it just rolled off the tongue. And we kind of...
It's a smooth title. It's a smooth title.
Thanks, man. And then we kind of sat there and we're like thinking like, should it be Relic and Rhyme or Rhyme and Relic? Like I was really picky about it. What sounds better off my tongue, And so, we just went with how it is. And yeah.
Dope, man. Anything else you want to like let people know about the project?
About that project in particular?
About this project in particular. We'll carry on to something else after this. But anything else particularly with this project? Just because it was the last one that came out.
I feel like even though I was like, I need to put something out, I was always trying to one up my first project, which I still think is some of the best things I've ever done. Was the ninth. Yeah. And so, which was a concept album. And so I feel like once I put it out, I was like, all right, it's out. It's not mine anymore. Like, I can't wait to perform these songs, and getting on that mode now, kind of shifting gears of like, now it's time to perform these songs. And I really have to like prepare myself for that, because once I put it out, like, even though I'm obviously nobody's forcing me to do it, I'm doing it voluntarily, putting this music out because I want people to hear it, or I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have put it out if I didn't. I kind of have to prepare myself to like performing them, because the songs are so personal, and in that process of like going from creating to like, oh man, am I ready to actually share it live with people? I was listening to it to memorize, because I sit there and listen to it to memorize before shows and pick out which songs I feel like would hit. I started falling in love with it more than when I actually put it out. Not that I didn't, not that I wasn't sure of it, but I was like, man, I think I did it. I think I was par 2 or a little bit better than the 9th finally. I went through this like rediscovery again of myself from A to B, because Old Soul Era was a collective of people, and then it just was me left. So Old Soul Era is now just myself. But now I'm bringing in other people like Rose to do features, or my boy Aware. So I feel like it was a growing up type of record, and I still wanted to have some jazzy, fun vibes to it. So yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Interesting. I like that, man, because, like you said, you create in your room, you're alone, and you're not making, it doesn't sound like you made those records with the intention of performing them, really. You made them with the intention of creating and getting whatever ideas out that you had.
Yeah.
So to come to that realization before performing them, like, yo, these are going to be dope. I'm excited to perform these for the people. Like, that must be a really cool feeling as an artist.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of artists, especially who are bigger, they'll make songs with the intention of performing them. This part is going to get the crowd to go crazy, you know what I mean? They'll set records up a certain way because almost more for performing than for the record, you know what I mean? Talking about sort of the mainstream artists, you being more of an independent artist, like we talked about the lines blurring a little bit. What do you consider there to be a mainstream and independent underground scene? Is it all just music? What are kind of your thoughts on this?
I mean, that's a great question, because it's all kind of blending in now, isn't it?
Genres are blending and bending, right?
Yeah, TikTok is a new radio. I've heard that.
I have not heard that. That's interesting.
It's crazy, man. So, yeah, music is everywhere, and there's people releasing singles after singles after singles, and it's becoming EPs and things and music videos. Everything's so visual now. Yeah, I think there still is a mainstream, and it's called the algorithms. The algorithms decide what is poppin', and sometimes that's somebody like Dogface and a funny video of him just cruising down his longboard with, some music to it. What was it? Fleetwood Mac, yeah. And that's what the algorithm decides that day is popping. Sometimes it's Kanye West saying racist shit about other cultures. And sometimes that's the mainstream. So yes, I still believe there's a mainstream in media, and it's a lot visual. It's a lot more visual than it's ever been, even though we went through the bling era before, and how cool you should look and how many chains you should wear. Yeah, there definitely still is a mainstream and an underground, and it's always going to be that way, I think. There's time and time again the story of good and evil. I don't want to say that like the mainstream is evil, but the powers that be is said in, it's time and time again, it's said in every narrative. If you really break it down to its core, Star Wars, the rebellion, there's always going to be the rebels and the people that are going to go against the grain. Yeah, without a doubt, there's still a mainstream and there's still an underground scene.
Talk about staying true to yourself in these times.
Yeah, it's hard. It's super hard, especially because the core of Old Soul Era was based on staying true to yourself. When we started Old Soul Era, we were really adamant about that. When we started performing, a lot of the shows that we were booked on were with artists who were talking about things that were completely different than, if you want to say, conscious rap. You know, we were stuck performing with a lot of people talking about guns and shooting people, and a lot of them we knew personally, knowing damn well they've never done any of those things. So we already kind of had this like chip on our shoulder where it's like, man, I've actually seen those things happen, and they're horrible, and they've scarred me forever, and I don't wish that upon anybody, and why would you glorify that? So on a personal level, it was hard to detach from that, and I got really angry at shows. And for those of the followers that might watch this that have been to some early Old Soul era shows, they know how we got on stage, and we were ready to throw down with like whoever had some shit to say that wasn't relevant to reality. And it kind of made me feel, I don't know if stuck up is the word, but I definitely wasn't happy with myself sometimes after shows, because I was like, man, I probably shouldn't have said this shit on stage. I probably shouldn't have gone at that person like that, because I just believed in what we were doing so much. I had to take a step back and kind of reanalyze everything and be like, man, music is music. Who gives a fuck? Just let people do what they're doing. You do what you're doing. I don't want to come off too preachy, and I feel like sometimes that was happening on stage, because I just because I believed in what we were saying so much. But yeah, I mean, that's what it came down to, is just us at the beginning very much so believing that like the corporations and social media were always the enemy, and following them would only make us, you know, one of them. And that kind of is why Old Soul era went into different ways, because we didn't agree on certain things, like the social media thing. At first it was like we were so anti it, and then after taking music business and seeing how the world is functioning, it's a necessity. And I don't want to even say a necessity. Let's say more like it's a weapon that we can use, whether we like it or not. We can use weapons against them.
Very valuable tool.
Yeah. And so the social media game, I mean, I try to stay relevant by posting things. Some of the things that we learned in music business were like, sometimes people follow you because they really like your music, and that's great. But sometimes they follow you because you're a father, and that's relatable, and they want to see fatherhood things. So that's what kind of got me to posting things about my life. A lot of the artists that I like, that I follow, were doing things like that, and it's like, oh man, he does this too, he does that too, or she does this too. As a fan, and as the youth inside me was like, you know, enamored by that. So it kind of made me more comfortable sharing things like that. You know, whether it's your favorite drink and you take a picture of it, somebody might be scrolling, doesn't know what your music is or cares what your music is, but they're like, hey, I like that fucking drink too. And then they double click it, and then, you know, it's all part of the fucking matrix. But unfortunately, we got to play the game, and I'm trying to play it while still staying true to myself, for sure.
Nice, man. So we talked about Old Soul era sort of being a little bit of a collective. Rare Character Records, is that your record label?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Who's a part of it, and talk about how that came together.
Yeah, so Rare Character Records, it actually started from, the inception really started from a side project that I did with my homeboy Rico Suaves. He's another cat who really dove into like the doom sounds, and he really opened my ears to like, I guess, underground music, or, you know, not so mainstream music. And he, one of those cats that, again, you send him a beat and the next day you have a verse, a complete song, and it's some of the best shit you've ever heard. And he's another Chicano brother. So we met at a show at Donkey OT's, which was like right next to Bronco Stadium. And I was about to leave because I was super sick after my set. I had just gone out of the hospital, and I went to do my set and was about to go home that day. And on my way, literally out the door, some MF Doom beat comes on, and it's Rico rapping over it. And that's how I met this guy. And we started making music. We connected that way. And we were like, we should do something together. One of his alter egos is Havoc, Reek Havoc, RIQ. And so we decided to do a side project called the Havoc Era. So HAVOQ. If you look that up on your social medias, you'll find our record, the Havoc Era. That's really where the inception of Rare Character Records started, because like it was an outlet for me to be a little bit dirtier and nastier than I normally would be. Where like the Also Era, again, staying true to myself. Not that I wasn't true to myself with the Havoc, but it let me talk about some things that I might talk about when like the lights are off or whatever, like to my homeboys, right? Some dirty shit, some nasty shit. It's not all
grimy.
More grimy. It's not all rainbows and sprinkles, you know. I've seen some shit too, and I've done some shit too that, you know, is still lingering in my aura. So I wanted to express that through that project. And yeah, and so that's where like we started talking about that word and rare characters, and how we were like a bunch of rare characters because we were so different and unique, but could vibe and combine like Voltron, you know. And for some dumbass reason, I don't know why, we decided to pull the trigger. Well, it wasn't dumb at first, but we decided to pull the trigger during COVID because we like had nothing better to do, and we had bought a machine to print shirts. We had started a website and wanted to put all our music on our website. And so he had actually done the logo for it, which is that like frowny face. And we came up with the name, Rare Characters, because we just kept saying how we're this collective of rare characters. So who started it was me, my boy Howard, and who was part of Also Era, and then Reek Suaves. And our outlook on it was like having a platform to put all our music on, express ourselves, artwork. We don't do just music. We do all kinds of other stuff. We dance, we make art. And so we wanted to have just like a hub of where we could do that. Me, in the back of my mind, I've always wanted, going back to the goal thing from the very first question, I've always kind of wanted to do something similar to like a Stone's Throw record thing, where it's like, it's not just hip hop, just anything that sounds good, putting it out. So that was like the main idea behind continuing with Rare Character Records, even though we got hit with COVID, and it's like, shit, we can't really do any shows right now. What a time to fucking put out a record label, you know? We could just work on music and at least put music out. So we did that. We did a few albums, and then came across a few cats that we wanted to put on there. But the one we really clung on to and put on there was my boy Jordan, who goes by Aware 24/7.
Featured on a lot of the songs. Dope artist.
Yeah, he's different. Definitely on a different vibe than the Also Era vibe, but for some reason it just clicked, like him over jazzy beats, because he does a lot of harder stuff. I don't want to say trap stuff, but he does a lot of harder stuff than I'm accustomed to. So it was another challenge for me to work with him. Like, hey, this will be cool. I vibe with him. He's cool. I like the shit he's saying. Let's put him on some jazzy beats. But he has his own shit too that he does, and so yeah, that's really where it started from, and how it progressed, and where we're at right now is like still trying to get artists on there, you know. So anybody who's listening who wants to contribute and put some songs on, obviously. We're still working on building it so we can get everyone paid, but that's never been our main goal. It's always been to just put music out, do what feels good, put art out.
Bring it to the people.
Yeah.
Bring the people the vibe.
It's a collective is what it is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, dude. I appreciate that. Any new music releasing from the label soon?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was going to be my next question, sort of your music, you know, and what's coming next? Yeah,
well, obviously the stuff with Spawn. We got a record a song coming out that we're just waiting on after the holidays to get Rose to come through.
Okay. And
drop his verse. His verse has been done. He's just been patiently waiting for me to have time. And so it's going to be me, Spawn, and Rose. And you heard it here first.
Sweet. Oh, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Be on the lookout.
Yeah, and then we're going to have stage one, you know, doing some scratches over it. And hopefully building off that, making either an EP or an album with him. Nice. Because I'm not gonna let that opportunity pass up. Are you kidding me? No, man. Spawn, Also Era, Rose. So definitely something that that's coming out soon, real soon. And personally, I'm putting together another album. I'm gonna have some features on there. I just recorded a song with my boy Baba Fly, Inspector Gadget. I don't know if you've seen him, but he has his calculators and he does his pocket calculator
I've not
beats.
seen him yet.
Man, you got to come through.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be what's next is me putting out a new album and then hopefully getting an EP or a full album with Spawn. People have been asking for beat tapes, so I'm just thinking of just putting all the beats that I've done now out there.
That was a question that was kind of lingering in my head. You know, you have a lot of, what is it, 4 or 5 albums out on Spotify. So I was wondering, I was like, this guy's a producer. Where's the beat tape?
Yeah.
Not that they all need to have one, but it's just interesting. You know, I have a lot of just J Dilla,
Sure.
Beat Records, Large Pro,
Yeah.
you know, stuff like that.
Man,
So yeah, the people are waiting for that.
I'll send you all the instrumentals, man, so you can cut it up and
I'll
do
make
what
some
you gotta do.
mashups with them.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, that's a question that I get asked a lot, and a lot of the times, like, I really mean it. I want to work with people. I'm not lying to their faces when they ask me or when I tell them, but I just I don't know. I'm just a hermit, you know. It takes a lot for me to actually go out of my way and get out of my house. And no disrespect to anybody that I've ever
You're a
promised.
busy guy, family man,
Yeah.
The cultural center, you know, man works too. Like,
Yeah.
you got a lot going on.
But when it happens, and it's meant to be.
Absolutely.
But the beat tape thing is something that people have been asking me about. I've only released one, and it was that first project I've ever put out was a beat tape. It was like 22, 23 beats that are still all up for grabs, by the way. So go to Rare Character Records or Bandcamp, download them shits.
We got the link below, okay? Connect.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is that I had a laptop that was stolen from me last year, and it had everything, and my dumbass never backed it up. So in a way, it was a blessing in disguise because it made me kind of reinvent myself in a way. Again, that's been my favorite word tonight. But yeah, so I kind of had to restart everything, but the process has changed since then. My mentality has changed a little bit since then, and the world has changed since then. So I'm a different person today than I was when I was making those beats that were on the laptop that got stolen. So kind of a blessing in disguise that forced me to just start all over, start fresh, start with some new sounds. I had to officially buy Ableton, which I didn't have officially, so now I do. Shit's expensive, but here we are.
We were talking about that earlier, man.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a must. The beat tape thing is a must. I have a bunch of beats just sitting around. I just bought an SP 404 Mark II, the newest one. So I have a lot of beats that I've been throwing around. A lot of them I've played at the Mutiny Cyphers. So second Saturday of every month, my homeboys Small Boy Funk, DJ Cons, and Op One, we host a cypher there at the Mutiny Cafe. It's free, open mic cypher. Nasty beats just all the time. That's what I'm talking about, where your neck is just hurting the next day. Anybody who really does shit is there, and so you want to go there.
Yeah, I've seen many
Cafe.
clips. Looks very official. I work Saturday nights usually, so I'm usually too exhausted,
Dang.
but I'm going to definitely try to come to the next one, okay?
Yeah, man. Maybe calling sick or something. You never know.
Hey,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
You never
no
know.
pressure.
You might see me out there, Mutiny Info.
No pressure, but I've been kind of experimenting with the beats there and just kind of seeing what hits.
Getting some reaction, seeing.
Yeah, man. And then, like, it's just so humbling. Sometimes I don't know how to react when they tell me, like, how they feel about my music, just because I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? Your shit was crazy. Your shit made me make this shit because, you know what I mean? I made this because of the last shit you were doing last month here. And so, yeah, so I've been kind of testing out some new beats there, and people are asking me for them. So I'm always awkward with, like, selling them. People are like, how much are you charging for that? And I'm like, I don't know, man, you know?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to, like, you know, come up with a price, right?
Yeah. And maybe I need to find someone to do that for me, because I'm not good at those conversations.
You're more the artist, like, just connected to it. Are some of the beats, like, you almost, like, want to hold on to them for yourself too?
Yeah.
Is it hard to choose which are for you, which are floating around and still out there for other people? What's that process
Yeah,
like?
I mean, I've been my own enemy. Like, Terminology, when I met him and he gave me his, like, his layout. This is what I want. This is how I like it. This is how long they should be. This is the samples I like. And I'm like, check. I got all that shit. You don't even know how many beats I have that are right along your alley. And he's like, send them my way. And in the process of doing that, I'm like, fuck, this could change my life. Maybe, you never know. I'm thinking far ahead, but they just mean so much more to me than they'll ever mean to you. No disrespect, Term. I'm sure you understand. It's hard to let go of beats. You know, I'm not just making it because it's fun. I'm making it because I need to. So it's hard to let go.
I love the insight. The insight, man. We talked about skateboarding and hip hop sort of having connection. Another thing that I'm very interested in and see a close connection to hip hop with is mixed martial arts.
Yes.
So scrolling down on your page, I saw Brandon Royval.
Hey, Raw Dog.
It's your boy?
Yeah, it's my little brother, man.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Might as well be.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Also Era started with me and his big brother, and my boy Adam coming back to him, who introduced me to Atmosphere. Just messing around. His name is Darian, his brother. He actually introduced me to punk. He gave me 3 CDs to go home and study. AFI, The Art of Drowning, No Effects, Punk and Drublick, Anti-Flag, A New Kind of Army, and was like, go listen to this shit, man. And then he ended up getting into like Lil Wayne and like getting down a huge rabbit hole of rap while I was listening to these punk rock CDs he had me study. But once we actually started making music together, like he started coming over and dropping some verses. And so his little brother, Brandon Royval, has been like my little brother, and his little brother hung out with my little brother. So we were just always all together, and we'd have sanctioned fights in the backyard, you know, with some 4 ounces, sometimes or some 8 ounces, and sometimes with none. And, you know, sometimes it was for fun, sometimes a little cash, but yeah, I mean, that kid, it's been fucking awesome, man, seeing him develop, you know, from this
number 4 ranked flyweight in the UFC for the people who don't know.
That's right.
That's crazy. Beating some like serious names, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I saw that scrolling down your page, I mean, UFC, mixed martial arts is really like the number 1 sport that I follow. That's the thing that I'm most interested in.
Hell yes.
So to see, you know, anybody connected with somebody from the UFC, that's really cool, interesting to me. Maybe gotta have you put in a good word. We gotta talk to the man up here.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's go, man. Yeah, it's been amazing, you know, seeing his journey, and we're just all so fucking proud of him. He deserves it. Sweetest fucking person I've ever met. He's so caring, so kind, lovable person. He's a great uncle. But the second you step into the fucking cage with him, he's a raw dog, man. That's why they call him that. And those little guys, you know, the flyweights, don't get it twisted. Like, they'll fuck you up. Even like the women, all the women in there in that division, in the bantamweight division as well, like, they'll fuck us up, man. They train to take your fucking head off. And yeah, so it's been awesome seeing that kid's journey. He actually got called up to fight during COVID, because he was fighting for LFA for a good minute, and he won the championship there. And so when he got the call, he's like, of course, you know, I've been waiting for this fucking call, let's do it. So he fought at what's that arena? It's skipping my fucking name, and I've seen it 1,000 times, where there's no crowd.
The Apex.
Yeah. So he fought there for the first time. I think his first opponent was Tim Elliott, and we were like, "Oh my God, you're fighting fucking Tim!" We grew up watching. Yeah, no, we go heavy into MMA. We grew up, you know, hardcore WWF fans, WCW fans. Then when we discovered, you know, mixed martial arts, we were like, "Oh shit, there's people doing it for real." And this is when we were like little kids. You know what I mean? My brother going to Blockbuster, getting those first UFC VHSs because you couldn't watch it on TV anymore. Seeing the Gracies fucking destroy everybody. Remember those with the guy holding the world like over his head?
Oh yeah, the old logo.
Yeah, the old logo.
Gangster, that logo.
And so yeah, that runs deep. And like a family of Mexicans, we've always been into boxing. You know, Oscar de la Hoya before he got all weird and coked out. Excuse me, Julio Cesar Chavez, huge influence. So when we saw that there was people doing this shit for real in cages, you know, I stopped watching WWF. The Rock, cool and all, you know, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret the Hitman Hart, cool, but
the Gracie will still choke you out.
Yes.
Always Gracie's still going to take you down and put you out.
So it was a trip seeing that, and then seeing Brandon transition into that was, again, one of those things where you couldn't in your wildest dreams think of, but he fucking deserves it the most. And I'm sure everybody who has a loved one fighting in there says the same thing, or playing in sports. But like this kid, I've seen it, you know, he's just so sweet, and he's doing it all for all the right reasons, and he puts in the hard work, and he's a fucking killer, man.
That's awesome,
and
man.
he was always so
dope.
cool about like when he was in LFA and everything, because now you're not allowed to because of Reebok, but Dana White. But when he was in the LFA, he would come out with the fucking logo, with the big ass old Soera logo, just fucking giving it up and telling people to go listen to it on TV and
That's
shit.
fire.
Man, cool. So like, there's actually a callback to him on Fearless Vicious, when I talk about Raw Dog. So the second verse, him and my little brother, they used to scrap all the time. They used to go beat the fuck out of people, you know. And so there's a reference to him right there. So this is one of his favorite tracks too.
Nice, dude. Yeah, the connection that I see, one of the connections I see between hip hop and mixed martial arts is sampling. You know, sampling different styles, right? It's mixed martial arts.
Wu-Tang, man. Like, what do you got your Wu-Tang over here?
Well, you got Raekwon right behind you.
Here we go.
But yeah, we got Wu all throughout here.
Yeah, so, I mean, mixed martial arts, yeah, them sampling them shits, you know what I mean? Fighting and the different styles and adapting and how everybody came with their own, yeah. I mean, there's definitely, it was meant to be, you know? Passing down the art form, too, like when DJing first came out, and being very selective of who you taught how to do this certain art form. It wasn't just everybody. I know that I said earlier that music is for everybody, but there's an oversaturation in our genre because of that, where people no longer feel like they need to hone in a skill. They can just grab one of these things and say a bunch of random words and it sounds cool and mumble it and rubble, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas before, you really had to come and sharpen your sword. You had to sharpen the fuck out of that. And people, if there was even anybody teaching you, they were very selective of who it is they were teaching you, you know, how to cut records and how to write and shit. And it wasn't for everybody, you know. The thing that separates us from musicians who are playing instruments is that they're playing a fucking instrument and they know how to play. You can use the example of like people like Jimi Hendrix, who says he never studied music, you know, and just played music, whatever felt good, and it just worked, right? But there was still a structure. You can say what you want about Jimmy, but there was still some sort of structure and skill that, you know, not everybody could do what Jimmy was doing. If they could, everybody would be doing it, you know? And so with rapping, yeah, I feel like everybody thinks they can just pick up a mic and say a bunch of random shit, and like, you can have fun with it, but are you really artistic? No, there's a huge difference between a rapper and an artist, in my opinion. An MC and a rapper, you know? So
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so back to the martial arts, yeah, for sure, man. You can't just fucking put, you know, an amateur into the octagon with a fucking pro, you know? You're going to get fucking demolished, man. And so you guys should just put down the mic, man. You don't need to do this.
Put it down. We got the Brandon Royval of MCing over here, all right?
Oh, no way, man. Not even close. My boy Raw Dog. Yeah, man.
Dope.
That's cool. You saw that, though. Yeah, shout out to Raw Dog.
Absolutely,
He's
man.
recovering from, I think, a hand injury right now, so he'll be back.
We're looking forward to the next bout, Brandon, all right? So a big part of conversations with TMac is music. The other big part is food. All right. I work at a pizzeria out here. I mentioned to you, my family owns a pizzeria.
Cool.
Been working there for a while. But since I've been out here, been working at Blue Pan Pizza. They're a sponsor of this program. So we're going to hook you up with some pizza. All right.
Yeah.
I'll send you to the food truck to my guy, Gary. All right. We're going to hook you up.
Damn, that's awesome.
We'll get that worked out. But what are some of your favorite food spots in Denver or in Colorado? Where? Put me on. Where do I got to go?
Okay. If you really want some good food, you come to my mom's house. So first and foremost, man.
Okay, I love
As
it.
if you like Mexican food, she gets down.
I love it.
She just made a plethora of tamales for the holidays, so I might have to hook you up if you can hook me up with some pizza.
Shit.
We got those on reserve.
No question.
Yeah, man. Food spots, man. I really love food. I think Torres Mexican Grill is pretty good. I'm kind of simple when it comes to food. I'd rather make it myself. But if I'm going out, yeah, some of the best food spots are going to be Loteria for sure on Broadway, which is right next to literally Mutiny Cafe on Broadway. So if you're coming to see the Cyphers, go down there and get yourself some tacos.
Go a little early and get some tacos.
That's right. I've had a lot, and I mean a lot, of carne asada French fries. They're slaps so hard, man. It's so fucking good.
Okay.
It's so good. I love them. They don't necessarily love me anymore. My belly's changing.
That's how it happens sometimes.
Now that I'm older, but yeah, that spot's pretty good. As far as pizza, the spot right next to Loteria is called Pie Hole. They give you the big ass New York style pizzas. I've walked in there on late nights because they're open till like 2 a.m. and the homies there just kind of make whatever's left over, and they were whipping up a banana cinnamon fucking pizza.
Whoa.
And I was like, no way, you know?
Little dessert pizza.
Yeah, but I was, a couple deep, and I was like, fuck it. It was a dessert pizza for sure. No red sauce, obviously.
Yeah. I was like, hold on.
No.
I didn't think I would have to ask it. I'm
Yeah.
glad you put it out there for everybody else just to make sure.
Red sauce.
You said you went there late nights. We never know what they're whipping up, I guess.
Yeah, them fucking, those altitude boys, man, in Denver, they be high on some other stuff. It was really good. Those two spots are really good. I'm trying to think of something else. You kind of put me on the spot. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna have to try your pizza joint.
Hey, we don't need much more. So to let you know, Blue Pan Pizza is a Detroit style pizza place.
Cool.
So it's more of a thick pizza. I would compare it more to a like New York Sicilian rather than like a deep dish Chicago, which is like filled with toppings and cheese. It's a lot of dough, but it's like a fluffy light dough.
So we got to ask you right here, pizza, on the subject of pizza. Does pineapple go on pizza?
It does not go on pizza.
And why is that?
Because I'm a New York and I'm from New York and I'm a traditionalist.
What goes on pizza? Absolutely has to go on pizza.
Hey, I have to put it on the pizza at my job. There's no objection to it. I'm not crazy about it. But on my pizza that I'm making for myself, it does not go on there.
Okay.
I haven't found the right combination. People love it. People put it on there with barbecue sauce and people go crazy with it. But for me personally, pineapple's not my thing on pizza.
See, my perfect pizza, it's nice and thick. You got, your cheese, your red sauce, pepperoni, pineapple, and some jalapenos on that bitch. And
we have a pizza that's very similar to that. We got the bacon instead of the pepperoni. We'll hook you up with that, all right?
Hell yeah, man.
We got you.
Can't wait.
Old Soul Era, we're wrapping up here. Anything else you want to leave the people with?
No, man, this has been awesome. It's been cool getting to know a little bit more about you and you sharing some stories too. We're glad to have you on the scene. You definitely belong here. It was cool that you came out to support us for the Spawn show. Meant a lot to me, meant a lot to him. Once you told me a little bit more about you, I was like, hell yeah, man, this is good people. And so I'm excited to see what else you're doing out here. I'm watching you doing your interviews. I know you just had Rose out here.
Yep, Rose coming soon.
Yeah,
that'll be out by the time this one comes out. But yeah, man, we're racking them up.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna definitely be sending you some beats. I know I say that to a lot of you, and I don't. He's gonna get some beats to cut up.
Come to me for the beats now, all right?
But he talked me into it. I am putting out some beat tapes out there.
Let's go.
They're all gonna be free 99. Yeah, man. The only other thing I want to say is, thank you for having me. Thank anybody who's listening to me or to his show. Second Saturday of every month, Mutiny Cafe. Hip hop in its original state, real shit, raw. Come through, open mic cypher, no judgment. I might make fun of you. Heavy beats all night. And then the last Thursday of every month. I know it's kind of confusing, but if you follow us on social media, we post it. We do ciphers at River, so same thing, but over at the River, and just heavy hitters, man, through and through. There's some magic happening in the Denver hip hop scene, and you guys should be a part of it, even if you just come through one night. I myself, my classes are starting up again at the Lakewood Cultural Center, so I teach hip hop, dance, and beat making classes. My dance classes are just for the youth for now. So if you have littles, ages like 10 to 12, you can sign them up. Just go to Lakewood lakewood.org/LCC for Lakewood Cultural Center. And then my beat making classes are ages 10 to 12 and then 16 up. Have my oldest student, who was like a 68-year-old white lady, Linda. Shout out to Linda. She's retired and was like, hey, I want to learn how to make bangers.
That's awesome. Shout out to Linda.
Yeah, so she came through. We got some new gear. I was teaching them on the Koala app, the Koala Sampler app, which is huge. It literally does everything my expensive ass equipment room does, except for like $8. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a good sampler, a good sequencer. So yeah, come sign up for classes if you want to learn how to make beats. I really love doing that. We got some new music gear coming in, so I got one of those MIDI keyboards, some MPDs that we just got hooked up at the Lakewood Cultural Center. So it's going to give us a lot more of a hands-on feel than just touching the screen of the app. A lot of people need that, or it makes it feel more real, and you're definitely playing an instrument, even though it's on an app form. So this gives you that feel of like it's an instrument, you know what I mean? And then just thank you, man. Anybody who's ever listened to me or came out to support, or any of my friends, if you're supporting them, it means a lot to us. At least the people that I fuck with and myself, who don't make music to be cool or to be famous or for any of those reasons, it means the world to us, because the amount of work that we put in goes unseen. Even recording this podcast, homeboy here had to set up and get everything together, and then he's got to edit it. So thank you for taking the time to just hit a like, hit a share, fuck the algorithm.
Yes.
We own ourselves. And just be good to each other.
Appreciate that, man. Old Soul Era in the building. Conversations with TMac. Hey, look out for the next one. Get connected. We got all the links below. Old Soul Era. Thank you, man.
RareCharacterRecords.com.
Yes, we share. Yes, we share.
Swam with the savages, drowned with the languages. My tongue was at risk when I speak of a narrative inherited, hidden in the color of my melanin. You're staring into something that your skin can never fathom with its on. I just have to put my armor on, and I'm coming for your village like the one.